Thanks, Kathy. And for the benefit of people who are watching this at some point, I am having camera difficulties, so I will be chairing this meeting sort of partially in absentia. Looks like everyone's here. I see Martha, Mike, Rich, Glenn. I don't see me, but that's fine. So the first thing we have to do is pass a number of minutes with some small corrections that I sent to Michelle and all of you, which she has included. Is there, would anybody like to move these minutes? Rich moves, Martha second. I think we can do these as a group. Does anybody have any comments? Are we ready to vote? All right, Martha?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So those all passed. Many thanks to our hardworking clerks for all these minutes and all these meetings that we're having to have. And I want to apologize to Michelle and Kathy for the kind of agenda chaos that we've had the last couple of meetings. There's just a lot going on, and it shows up in all the last minute changes that occur in our agenda. In terms of changes to the agenda, we had several items and resolutions relating to the TC3 budget. At Bill Talbot's request, we're pulling those. Apparently, in order to accommodate the Cortland County Legislature, Bill has asked us to move consideration of the college's issues back until next month. So that's what we will be doing.
So, Deborah?
Yes.
I think it's only 2 of the 3 resolutions that need to be withdrawn. The resolution to hold a public hearing should go forward. We're just going to change the date in that resolution.
Can we move a resolution to have a public hearing when we don't know what the budget's going to be?
Well, as long as we have that information prior to the hearing, as I understand, the budget committee will have that budget at the next meeting in July. This hearing will be held July 20th.
So is that plenty of time? We
Yeah,
can move forward.
I believe so.
Okay, just let me double check. Because don't you need to have like 10 days?
No, not for this.
Oh, all right then. Okay, fine. We will move forward with that July 20th. Hang on. You said July.
We'll change the date in the resolution to July 20th.
Okay.
I think Bill Talbot's here too, but I had this conversation.
Yeah, I see him. Okay, that's what we will do then. You can just remind us when we get to that resolution, Kathy. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, Martha, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Deborah. Do you also mean to pull resolution? Well, here it's B, Workforce Career and Development Pilot Program. It's not about the budget. That's a separate funding item that you'd put together. That was packet page 32.
That was one of the 2 that
That
we
is
talked about. 2 of the 3 resolutions for TC3 were being withdrawn.
Right. Yeah, we're the only thing we're leaving on is the public hearing. All right then.
Correct.
Thank you.
Before we start, I wanted to bring something up for y'all. Kathy and I talked this morning about scheduling our expanded budget committee meetings in September and October for our departments and supported agencies to come and present. it appears that NISAC is going to be having its first in-person conference the 13th, 14th, and 15th of September, which puts a real crimp in Kathy's scheduling for the required meetings. So one thing I wanted to commend to your attention that would relieve some of the pressure, and I think would be in order this year, is to consider that rather than having every single department and supported agency come and present an overall picture of everything that it does, we would limit the presentations to those that involve departments and supported agencies that have presented OTRs that were not approved and made part of the administrator's budget, or OTRs with respect to which a legislator or more than one legislator has questions. This would substantially shorten our process. And the reason I think this might be a really good year to do that is because, as you can see today, we have lots of legislators attending committee meetings where they're not a member of the committee, which allows all of us an additional opportunity to become acquainted with what various departments and agencies do, even if they're not under the purview of program committees to which we belong. So I thought I'd run that up the BCP flagpole and see what you thought of that. And then maybe we can also suggest it at the legislature. It's an approach that would reduce the amount of time we have to spend on our budget process this year, and would help alleviate some of the scheduling pressures. So I'm happy to hear what y'all have to say. Rich.
I think that's an interesting idea. I'm not sure where I come down on it yet, but it does seem like a lot of people are coming, or a lot of departments come to budget because they have to come to budget and they read their slides. And I don't know that we really get very much from that. So yeah, this might make sense. I would like to have some avenue for departments heads to actually talk to the whole legislature if they wanted to, but I'm not sure it has to be budget. So that's it. I think this is something worth thinking about.
Yeah, it just seems to me, just from my admittedly limited experience with our budget hearings, that a lot of times we go down rabbit holes that don't have anything at all to do with budget requests that's in front of us. And while that's interesting, and certainly people who ask questions evince a genuine interest in what the department does, I don't know that that makes our budget process more successful or more efficient. So yeah, all right, I've got Martha and Mike.
Well, I appreciate the effort to try to figure out how to streamline things. If that were to be true, first off, I would want to include in that anything that's new that the county administrator would propose. I mean, anything new the administrator proposes is by definition included in her budget. But if it's new, it's something we've never seen before. So I think that would have to be included on the list. I think of that innovation initiative that Jason had included last year and that we ended up not approving. So I hope that was included in what you meant.
That's a sensible addition, Martha. I appreciate that.
Okay, thanks. And then I think what we would definitely, if that were to be true, we definitely need some time and intensive conversation between when the administrator proposes the budget and outlines what's included and what's not been included, in order for us to process and look through things and then to make requests. Well, you know, I just found this thing in highway. I sometimes go to, I'm making this up, funds sometimes go to facilities, but not always. But I just saw this thing in highway, and now I want to ask a question about it or propose an alternative. So there would need to be time to digest between when it's handed to us and when the final schedule is put together. If you could
Yes.
do
Yeah.
that would,
And it would put the onus of responsibility more on the legislators than on staff.
but it also, remember, it also hands the administrator a lot more authority. And I think we have to be prepared to understand those consequences. Okay.
Yes, if we're not responsible and we don't do our homework, that would be what would happen. Okay, have Mike and Henry.
Well, I'm really concerned about this suggestion. Where do the people in the departments get to talk to us if we don't allow them to come in even for this brief amount of time? Last year, I wanted to give the opportunity to the department heads that came to F&I the opportunity to come in and speak to the committee. And that was vetoed by our county administrator because he didn't want them talking to us about things that they might have wanted that he didn't want them to talk to us about. And Martha's right, it would give the administrator much more authority here. And I think we would not have the check and balance that we have in our process at this point. I'm sorry if these budget hearings take a while, but it's the best educational process we have for the full legislature. And I'm sorry that there's a conflict with NISAC meeting. It used to be very few people would go to the fall NISAC meeting. I don't know how many people are planning to do that this year, but doesn't mean that you still can't have meetings that conflict, because not everybody has to go to all the EBC meetings. We know that. And hopefully they could be arranged a little bit, and maybe we can cut down. Last year, the meetings were held pretty much within the time frame allotted. We didn't go into real lengthy meetings. Yes, they were short presentations, shorter than we've had in the past, but they were informative and helpful. It was only 2 or 3 or 4 that we got into the, as some of you say, got into the weeds. But I'd be real concerned here.
Okay, I have Henry and Rich and then Shauna.
Yes, Deborah, maybe you and Lisa can address what your draft schedule is, because I noticed that's the second week in September. And when would the budget books come out, and how many meetings would we actually be missing by having NISAC that week?
Well, Kathy, I will let Kathy address this, but as I understand it, we have 6 meetings during which we hear from the departments. And then we have 3 meetings where we can deliberate. And I don't know, Kathy, does that include the public forum?
No, it does not.
So Kathy apparently had 2 meetings scheduled for that week. I mean, I guess we could just make people choose between the NISAC conference and the budget hearings. I'm doing that as long as people don't cry about it.
Yeah, I checked on NISAC's website. They don't have the schedule up yet, but usually in the last day, they only go to the half day anyway, or they have business meetings that day. So we could meet on that Wednesday.
Yeah, but that's Yom Kippur.
Oh.
Well, I mean, the other option is that we can have fewer meetings. We can cram more departments in, and I can be a real martinet about how much time people get to ask questions, and I can stop the questioning if I think we're getting off into the netherworlds that have nothing to do with the budget. But I know, having watched Mike and Martha very ably handle these hearings, in the past that that's difficult to do. And everyone takes exception to that. So we're kind of between a rock and a hard place. Okay, Rich, Shauna, Martha.
Yeah, to Mike's point that this is the opportunity for department chairs to speak to us, I agree. But a lot of what they talk to us about has nothing to do with budget. You know, I'm happy to hear from the department heads. Maybe we need another format for that. And maybe we need another format just for these chats that a lot of legislators want to have with department heads that are not related to budget. You know, we certainly could do that. Maybe you block out a series of 5-minute times at our legislature meetings, and department heads come and just talk to us. Let them have free reign to talk about their department and their goals and what they do, but we don't try to cram it into a budget box and focus on what are the real budget questions at the expanded budget committee. Thanks.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, Shauna, Martha, Annie.
Thanks, Deborah. I think Rich is right. I think that we separate the conversation about what departments are doing. And quite honestly, I feel like we're doing that in our committees. I know that in HHS, we go around, we get a 5-minute update from all departments on what their plan is. We went through goals and priorities at the beginning of the year. I try and check in quarterly on those goals and priorities. Rich does the same in public safety. And so, you know, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but, you know, and I get it, Mike. We've all done these budget meetings. There's certainly value to the budget meetings and hearing how we're spending county taxpayer money. But I think there definitely becomes a point where we're overdoing it and where I think we're getting too much information and we're diving way too deep into the actual day-to-day operations. You know, I think, Deborah, if it's possible, keeping it, I guess, more on the budget and less on the day-to-day operations, I think that would help with the time. I also would not change the schedule or I would accommodate the NISAC conference because for many of us, I haven't been in 2 years and I'd really like to go this fall. And I think that's important for us doing a good job for the county. So I would hate to sacrifice that for one of the budget meetings. Thank you.
Thanks, Shauna. All right, Martha and then Annie.
I think there's a real amnesia here. Last year, we had only one of all the meetings went over the time that was allotted, and all the rest ended up shorter. I have last schedule. We also didn't start till September 14th. If you remember, I can't remember whether it was Labor Day was a weird timing or Jason there were a lot of numbers we didn't know. Last year was weird for every sort of reason, but we didn't have the first presentation until September 14th. Looking at this year's calendar, we start on, you know, if the first ledge meeting is the budget is the 7th, we could either do the administrator's presentation on the 7th and then have an expanded budget meeting, say Thursday the 9th, and have no problem avoiding, you know, we always have to avoid the Jewish holidays. That's not new. I really think the fact that a lot of legislators go to meetings of committees that they're not on is a sign of interest and it's a sign of commitment, but it should not be required for people to keep up and know what the budget is about and to keep up. You know, we can't all be on all committees. People have all sorts of different commitments. They commit to the committees that they're on, but it's not fair that somebody has a gap in knowledge because they weren't able to get to extra committees during the year. That's what the expanded budget committee meetings are all about. I think, yeah, it's an intense period of time, but we've worked this out over a lot of years. And sure, I think department heads might be able to be some of them a little bit more, coached to be a little more succinct. But all in all, I think, it's a pretty good system, and I really hate to mess too much with it.
Annie.
Thank you. Glad my video's working. Let's see. So I had a couple thoughts. I really like the overall idea of trying to figure out, looking at, can we pare this down? And again, as I've said before, if this pandemic has taught us nothing, it's that, rethink how we do things. So one idea I have is that if they don't have an OTR, so this, I'm flexible at this point of whether it's in a recommended or not recommended OTR, but say they don't have, if a department or an agency doesn't have an OTR, they report to that committee, and then for their budget, if it makes sense, and then that committee chair, and Dominic, if we want, could put out, can kind of put this information together, give it out to, to the public, or post it somewhere that people can look it up and go, hey, so if you really want to know what's going on with that agency or that department, here you go to HHS meeting on this date, and at 29 minutes starts their presentation. That's transparent. All the committee meetings right now are public, they're recorded. So I think that would save a lot of staff and legislator time, and we can look them up. It's not very hard to look it up, and if you want to hear that. But think about the amount of staff time that takes, and the people, sitting there waiting for their turn. So I think this could make efficiencies for a lot of us and a lot of the staff and agencies. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Does anybody else have anything they want to offer? Glenn. You're being very profound.
Yes, I know. I agree with Michael Lane. I think it's very important to see these department heads at least once a year. But I agree with Rich saying that we should limit it only to the budget. Maybe limit it to 3 slides or something like that. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Martha.
Just quickly, just that, again, this is the only time the public might get a chance in one, to see holistically what the budget's all about. So I think we have to remember that, and sort of assuming people are going to go and will go and can go online to look it up later is just not very transparent.
Okay. So I guess I will bring that up tomorrow evening at the legislature, and if people who aren't here or didn't speak today have anything to offer, we can just try to reach some consensus on making this process a little more efficient. Are there any members of the public here who want to make a comment, Kathy?
No, Deborah, there's not.
Okay, in that case, I think we'll move right on to the County Administrator's Report. Welcome, Lisa.
Thanks, Deborah. So I have a number of items today, updates. I have a presentation, and there are a number of resolutions as well. And I'm wondering if we could start with the resolutions, because I'm aware that there's some staff waiting for them that may need to leave. Would that be acceptable? Okay. So the first, I believe, is the resolution for the appropriation from the Contingent Fund for the audiovisual equipment.
Okay, Glenn, are you moving it?
Yes.
Okay, Mike, are you seconding? Okay, thank you. Lisa, before I call in Martha, do you want to just give us a quick overview of what this is about?
Yes, I believe this went to the GO committee, and this is in regard to streaming services for the legislature and an overage in the cost of the contract by $1,500.
Yeah, and it also, I think, went to BCP, and this would be coming out of rollover. So Martha, you have a question?
Oh, well, it says contingent fund.
Oh, it
But-
does?
It does say contingent fund.
That's one. The other, my actual question was, what's the budgeted amount? So this is 1,500 over how much?
I'm wondering if Dominic could speak to this. This was put together through, and he's not on the line.
So
sorry.
this is
sorry,
not
Kathy.
this is not use of rollover. This is an appropriation from contingent fund.
Yeah, you're right. I had this confused with other motions. I think they're on the ledge agenda for tomorrow night.
Correct.
So I support this. I just want to know what the original amount is.
We can get that amount for you, Martha,
Okay.
shortly, I think.
All right, thank you.
Is this the money for the new screen? Go hybrid?
I think this is solely for the contract for the
It's
support
the
services.
maintenance of the equipment in legislature chambers, the audio, video equipment. And that includes the screens and the projectors and the cameras.
Mhm.
Okay. Anything else? Are we ready to vote? Martha,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes,
Rich,
Yes.
Glenn,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So that passes. What's your next resolution, Lisa?
The next resolution is an appropriation from the contingent fund authorizing county administration to enter into consulting agreements for administrative and budgetary purposes.
Okay, can I get a motion on that, please? Martha? Mike seconds. All right, Lisa, you want to just explain this one to us?
Sure, it's really to help with the transition in administration, which would enable me primarily to enter into consulting agreements with both our previous county administrator, Jason, and our budget manager, Kevin, just for help in the process with bringing new staff on to ask questions throughout the budget process, because we are right in the middle of it, and both staff have transitioned or are in the process of transitioning.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions about this? I just want to say that I really understand why this is necessary, and Lisa, you have my profound sympathies
Thanks.
for finding yourself in a position so soon in your tenure to have to go through this process pretty much on your own. I have a question for Mike and then Shauna.
I just wanted to say, Deborah, I totally second your comments you just made.
Oh, thank you. Shauna.
I just wanted to ask, and it doesn't have to necessarily be answered here, but is there a certain rate that's negotiated?
Yes, for each.
Okay, and how is that rate determined?
Well, it's going to be based on the going rate and based on, probably basing on previous salary and going rate for contracting, because contracting typically entails more than just a salary, but other taxes and other factors. So,
And no benefits as well. Okay, thank you.
Is it hourly?
yes.
Okay, thank you. Martha?
So Kevin is here through July 24th or something?
Yes,
Okay, so while he's on staff, he's not,
correct.
okay, all right. And then is there a sense, do you have even a ballpark that, you know, you would be using one of the two versus the other? Or is there, I mean, this is just a round number. Do you have any estimate yourself of what the proportions might be?
Yeah, it's just a round number. I know Jason's availability was probably going to be one afternoon a week, like 4 hours a week at most. We haven't crossed the bridge yet with Kevin, and a lot of that will depend upon how quickly we can bring new hires on and have them have the time to overlap with Kevin in terms of the budget software and troubleshooting. But I would imagine that would be no more than what I just described with Jason. And I would guess, you know, a lot of troubleshooting and, you know, at various critical times of the process. Because it is a proprietary software that at this point only Kevin truly understands.
Okay, the keys to the kingdom. Thank you, Lisa. And, you know, I have every confidence that, you know, you've done a lot of budgets so far. You know, I'm sure you have a lot more skills than you maybe would think you do, but I think this is a good step.
Thanks.
It's always good to have training wheels your first time through. Are we ready to vote? Martha?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay. Next resolution, Lisa.
Yeah, this is an exciting one. This is just formalizing that, authorizing county administrator to execute the necessary agreement to accept the allocated American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 funds.
Okay, can I get a motion? Martha moves, Glenn seconds. Discussion, or should we go right to questions?
Well, you know, the technicalities of doing this, we've already, the finance office has already, you know, pulled the funds down and deposited them into an interest-bearing account, but this just formalizes that we've done it.
Okay, thank you. Martha?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm the interest-bearing phrase there. This is a lot of money, and even though interest rates are terribly low, it's a good thing to do. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions or comments? We ready to vote? Martha?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes, but I would note, I'm not sure what a no vote would even be. So
No, we don't want that $9 million. Glenn?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm a yes. So we are now officially the proud possessors of $9.9 million. Okay, now, the next resolution is actually a member filed resolution that Martha and I worked on together. So I think we're going to hold that one till closer to the end of the meeting and move on to Lisa's report.
Okay, and then there were a couple of others that I believe they're listed at the end under resolutions, but they're out of county admin. The
Oh,
CJP
okay. You want to do
position.
those?
If you wouldn't mind, if we're on a roll.
We're on a roll. Let's keep rolling.
Okay. It's the resolution, the creation of community justice center positions of project director and data analyst and approval of program funds. So these you've seen these through other committees.
Okay. All right, so let's do the Community Justice Center positions, and fortunately, we have Rich John here to answer any questions we might have. Does somebody want to move that? Rich moves it, and Martha seconds it. Okay. So who wants to introduce this and talk about it? Kathy, you have your hand up.
I do. I just want to clarify that we're moving the revised resolution as recommended by the finance director that was sent out.
Okay.
Oh,
That's the other one.
my apologies. Yes, that's the next resolution.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm going to let Rich talk about this first, and then we'll hear from Martha.
This is really a cleanup resolution that we've already authorized creation of the CJC, but what we needed to do was to create the positions. So it's really a part of the mechanical process behind the curtain, but we need to do it to keep this going. I think there was a question about the numbers in there. I believe those are annualized costs, even though in 2021 we would not spend that full amount. It also represents half of the full cost in that we would be splitting this with the city of Ithaca.
Right. We pay a little more than the city, I think, because we pay for
Software.
Yeah. But I'm not sure, and I would defer on this to Kathy and Mike and Martha, because you have much more experience with budget. Is there a problem that we're approving an annualized cost? What happens to that if it's not used? Does that revert to the general fund? Or maybe Rick can answer that question.
It reverts to the general fund, just like any other unfilled position or vacated position.
Okay, so do you have any particular preference about correcting the numbers, or are you okay with this as it is?
I'm okay with it as it is.
Okay, then I think we can pass it as it is. Martha?
Well, actually, maybe we need to add something about not just transferring to the 2021 budget, but creating target, with the exception of the software expense. And I would say this isn't half. This is Tompkins County. I'm looking at packet.
This is the entire first year for Tompkins County.
For Tompkins County, right? But I thought
Right.
to be cut in half because the city pays half. This is our half of it.
Right, for an entire year, even though they won't be on board for the entire year. So we would have to, let's see.
And
So you
Deborah, I could add a little bit more on the trail of money on how this has moved so far. It has already been appropriated out of the contingent fund and had been placed into the county administration fund a while back. That's for the full $144,380. With this follow-up resolution, it takes it out of county admin and it adds it and it moves it to another unit that's specific for this purpose. And that's where you see the project director, data analyst, program expense under a separate unit 1237. So it's more of a budget transfer from one county administrative unit to another. And so we're not moving anything out of contingency.
Right. But I'm not sure that that addresses Martha's concern about whether or not we need to put something in this resolution about target for 2020.
I believe that we would be expressing the funding for 2022 would be expressed through an OTR in the coming budget. And I think the intention was to have it start out as 3-year one-time funding.
Okay, right.
So we're not going to adjust target. That makes sense. Thank you, Lisa.
Mhm.
Does that address your concern?
Yeah, but I had a couple other things.
Okay.
And this is more to the substance of the positions and the timing that are described, like packet page 39, for example, and 41, if I could take a moment. It says in the middle of packet page 39, the CJC staff, we have an expectation that CJC staff will be hired and on board by the end of October. I worry about that. I know we really are eager and, everybody's urgent to get this going. However, when we developed the timeline for CJC, we did not expect to lose our county administrator or our budget personnel. And the county, maybe the city by then knew that they were going to lose their chief of staff. But I know we're going to talk about the search for county administrator later in the meeting, but I would like our full force of our human resources department dedicated to getting the county administrator issue on the road and going and moving quickly, because that one drives everything else. So I worry that if we have a deadline like this, I know it's not in the resolution, it's in the document. I worry that that's not the priority that we really need to be making. I also have a concern about the advisory board. I'm looking at packet page 40. It says that members of the advisory board would serve 1 to 2 year terms by appointment of the legislature and common council with appointment annually. I think it should be at least 2 years. Most of our advisory board appointments are 3 years. So that's a question. And then I wonder if there are, in the description of these positions, there are so many meetings which seems correct. I wonder if there's going to be any clerical support, like literally, a person to help do the shepherding and help keep the train on the tracks. I worry that we'll burn out 2 qualified people who would be, their job isn't to manage a calendar, but if we don't provide any support, I don't know if that's considered here at all. Those are 3 content questions, and I don't know, I'm not safety, so.
I think that Rich may be in a position to answer some of these questions, but I would note that this content is in a memo from Jason and Savante and the Common Council, and it's dated May 18th, which is that not, did we not have this when we passed the resolution moving the funds into contingent fund?
Well, I will say that the Public Safety Committee got this many pages and more than this, I believe, the night before their meeting. They didn't have any advance time. I noticed when it came through, and it was less than 24 hours before their program meeting.
Well, I'll let Rich address that. I'm just not sure to what extent we can change anything that's in a memo from Jason and Savante. Rich, do you have anything to say about this?
Sure. Martha, I think you make a good point about it's pretty important that we are able to have the focus on the county administrator search. And what's here in the memo, I think, is clearly aspirational. We want to do the best we can. I would also say there might be a walking and chewing gum aspect to this, that you could do the 2 at the same time. But obviously, if there was a conflict, I would prefer that county administrator get the attention. This is something I don't want to put Ruby on the spot, but maybe she could say if she thinks there's going to be a crunch here because of this search occurring in combination. But if it doesn't happen by October, it doesn't happen. I mean, we get up and running when we're up and running. I know we've made commitments to our public, and we should, that we take this seriously and we want progress. But this is a marathon. It is a long run. And so if it's not October, that's okay. from my standpoint, but I would defer to Ruby.
Okay, we would hope that we'll be along at the part of the search for the county administrator, that this won't be a problem. We'll be initiating, but they want to have these positions on board by October. Then, as Rich said, if we don't, we don't. The city will have some input as far as helping us with the search, so we won't be doing it on our own.
I understand. So I'm kind of putting on the record that what
Priorities.
what the stacking should be with any sort of notion of the importance and urgency of these positions. We really get things going. And I know staff are working on some of the items, concurrently anyway. So, all right, thank you. And I know this is probably not the place to raise, to talk about the advisory board tenure and whether there's clerical support, et cetera. So I'm just kind of, as I said, not being on public safety, raising these now, and I'm sure that would just become part of the conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's more within the purview of public safety to consider. So does anybody else have anything to say about this?
Just that we did not have any conversation about terms or anything else at public safety on the advisory board. We just haven't gotten there yet, but we will. And I think I agree with you that you'd want a little bit longer tenure than a year so that people could get their feet under them and dig in. But again, we'll get there. We will have lots of argument and discussion about it, I'm sure.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, ready to vote. Martha?
Yes, you always wait till I've muted myself. Yes.
I keep you on your toes. Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the resolution that was amended by our finance director. That is appropriation to provide funding to the Public Health Department from FEMA grant revenues and authorization for the interim county administrator to execute contract with Cayuga Health Systems for the contractual expenses of community surveillance testing for Tompkins County residents related to COVID-19. And that is ID number 10173. Can I get that moved? And then Lisa will explain this to us. Glenn moves and Mike seconds. Thank you. Lisa?
Okay, and in a masterful move now, I'm going to turn it over to others that know the details of this. And I'm looking at Amy, Jessica, and Frank Krupa, who may be able to speak to this in more detail.
Thank you.
So I'll start, and then Jessica and Frank, please jump in. This resolution has to do with the initial setting up of the testing facilities back in March through August of last year. CHS, Cayuga Health Systems, did this on behalf of the county to increase our testing efforts here. We had worked in partnership throughout that, and they incurred expenses during that time period. We had met with FEMA representatives and others many times to discuss how to best approach this. And we were directed to have the hospital go ahead and approach this from their perspective. However, once the hospital did that and submitted everything, we were contacted, and Jessica has more information on that, multiple times to let us know that that approach was not the correct one. What they would like us to do is have a retroactive contract with the hospital as those expenses were incurred through this partnership. We would of course, then put out with that contract, we would pay for those expenses and then seek FEMA reimbursement on those costs. And so that's the resolution before you today. I know there were some edits, I believe Martha had on some of the numbers and some of the pieces on this, and I'm happy to talk more about those edits. I don't know, Jessica, if you have anything else about the logistics of how this came.
Excuse me. No, just that it is expected that this is FEMA reimbursable. It's just like all of our other contracts that have been amended, repeatedly amended with Cayuga Health Systems. It reads the same and will continue to be so. And we've gotten FEMA funding from them on that. Yes, the hospital submitted for reimbursement. They were told no. Initially, we were told that the hospital, as a private not-for-profit, could submit for FEMA reimbursement. For whatever reason, they decided that this wasn't FEMA reimbursable for a private not-for-profit, that counties, government entities had the responsibility for this surveillance testing, which is why we entered into the contract back in September. And this is just to cover the time period from March 24th through August 31st.
And I think the other question that has come up is about how many tests has the hospital done at this point. That number is a challenge, I will say, because of how we're doing testing in partnership with Cornell, Ithaca College, and others to understand which is which and which is bound together. So, you know, as a community, I believe we're over 1.2 million or something like that at this point. We have not parceled that all out. We do know that Hugo Health Systems is the major partner in that, and they work closely with those other entities as well. So I don't know if Frank, if you have anything else there before we go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say that it's obviously the testing that Cayuga Health Centers would be billing to us through the contract has parameters around it. So if the concern is we're paying for testing that Cornell did or Ithaca College did, the answer to that would be no. There are parameters around the contract that accounts for that. The partnership with Cornell and Cayuga Health Systems is what muddies the waters a bit. Cornell's laboratory has done over 1 million tests. We know that. They've celebrated that landmark. But when the lab at Cornell does a test, they don't know the human being that test is connected to. They just have a number. And then CHS makes the connection to a human being through that number, which then is done through the health side to make sure people are notified about their results or have access to the results. So it's all kind of worked together regardless of where the test takes place. But the contract would only be paying for those that fall within the parameters that are established.
Okay. Well, I don't know in what order you want to do this. I mean, I guess we could consider Martha's proposed changes. It doesn't seem to me that any of them are particularly controversial. That sixth whereas, I guess we could just say that whereas the early availability of surveillance testing has played a significant role in Tompkins County's ability to keep disease prevalence low, would that be acceptable to whoever wrote this?
I can explain. And
no, I mean, that's fine. You explained it perfectly clearly in your email. I'm just not sure, you know, usually when somebody offers an amendment, you ask if it's friendly to the person.
Right, but that wasn't.
And I don't know who that person is.
My suggestion was not what you just said. So I'm happy, I'm fine with everything except it is to control the spread of COVID-19 by limiting testing to symptomatic individuals. I don't think that's actually true. And then just grammatically, the two that's there didn't make sense. But I'm fine with this. Science has demonstrated that there are many asymptomatic individuals. I'm happy to have that in there.
Okay. But that still leaves my question. Who needs to say that that's all right? Who drafted this?
So it was drafted by us with the Public Health Department and the EOC. So I think that's fine, Deborah. That edit makes sense.
Okay. So we're just, that whereas we'll read, whereas science has demonstrated.
Right. And the early availability of.
Right.
And then my other question was, I'm a little confused about, I understand what you're saying, Amy, about the tests. I'm a little confused about what period where these funds are being requested for. Is it March 20, the two periods, March 24th to December 12th?
No, March 24th through August 31st.
Yeah, that's in the ninth whereas.
Right, but the earlier date also, the earlier period, or the September to December is also included there. I'm not sure why, if that's not part of the reimbursement.
That's already being reimbursed for.
I think it's just to include it to show that this is a retroactive contract on top of what we're already doing.
Okay, could it say, whereas September to December, over 13,000 tests have been conducted, and FEMA has reimbursed the county for those tests? Would that be accurate?
And FEMA reimbursement has been sought for those tests because we haven't received it all yet.
Which is on the next page.
We're $1.8 million in the hole on FEMA.
The first whereas on the second page is where it shows the reimbursements.
Got it. Okay. All right. That's fine then. So what you're saying about the number over 600,000 tests, like we're safe in saying CHS has done 600. That's great. Okay.
I did not have an accurate number when this was written from CHS to be able to put that in there. So I left it as over what we knew we had.
Okay. Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, so are we good with this? That one change in the sixth whereas, Martha?
That's fine with me. Yep.
And is that friendly to the mover and seconder?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, now, Henry, I see your hand. I have a question of my own first. And that whereas on the second page, it looks like we're about 2.2 million in the hole in terms of waiting for FEMA reimbursement on the claims that or 1.8 million in the hole in terms of reimbursement for the claims we filed, right? We're still waiting on that.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so this 1,014,750 we want to appropriate by this resolution will be in addition to that 1.8.
Correct.
That we're already waiting on. Okay. All right then, Henry.
So does this amount cover any of the insured testing that was done?
No.
No, it wouldn't be allowable, so no.
Okay.
Because we only paid for people who couldn't get their testing paid for otherwise, right?
Well, I guess I thought they stopped paying for it in July. The insurance stopped covering it.
It's in the contract currently, and I believe it will be in the contract that this will cover retroactively, that we are only billed for those that are either not insured or insurance has denied.
So just to be clear, insurance has and continues to pay for what they deem medically necessary testing, which is for a symptomatic individual or someone who has been identified as a close contact of a positive case by the local health authority. So insurance has and continues to pay for folks that fall into that category. We're paying for everything outside of that.
Okay, and the amount that the $2 million amount is basically everything that's been covered, including the back payment, the back contract.
No, the just over $1 million that we're asking for in this resolution is not included in the 2.6 million that we've paid out to FEMA for FEMA reimbursement. It's not included. So this will increase it to over 3 million.
Yeah, that was my last question, Henry.
Yes, just wanted to make sure.
Okay. Dare I ask what happens if FEMA doesn't reimburse us?
No, you should not dare to ask.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica.
Just accept the $9 million, Deb. We're good to go.
Oh, yeah. And I've got 16 ways to spend that, and then everybody else has 16 of their own. All right, are we ready to vote? Kathy?
Sorry, Martha had one more change she wanted to recommend in the 10th whereas. Was that being considered too?
Yeah, does that clarify it? It said, and as of June 2021, CHS has conducted over 600,000 tests. Does that, I wasn't gonna raise that, it was such a small thing, but
I think that's probably fine with everyone, isn't it?
it's a little clearer. Okay,
Makes sense.
thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. I don't know what I'd do without you. Okay, now are we ready to vote? Martha?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
All right. All right, now Lisa. Your report, please.
Thank you. And thanks to all the staff that helped with that resolution. So I wanted to provide just a quick update, a couple of quick updates, and then the presentation. An update on the hiring for the two positions, budget analyst and budget director. Since we last met, we posted those positions, HR posted those positions right away. We have been doing telephone interviews with candidates on an ongoing basis as the applications have been coming through. We have small candidate pools for both of those positions, so not large pools to choose from so far. So it was originally posted for 2 weeks. It was extended for another 2 weeks, which will be coming to an end on June 16th. You know, we may have some promising candidates that we will follow up on, but I just wanted to make everyone aware they're not huge pools, and we will. It somewhat maybe points to the compensation that we are offering for the positions, and I will be keeping you very much aware of this process if we end up without candidates for those positions. We may want to go back to the drawing board with and change the compensation. So that's the one update. Another update, and just for information, I have temporarily increased the salaries of certain county admin staff by 1 grade, which I believe is within my purview due to some of the increased workload in the absence of a county administrator, or in this case, it's in the absence of a deputy county administrator. This change is intended to be temporary to address that workload, but I wanted to make you aware of that. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, I know I have some slides to go through as well.
I do have one question, Lisa, sorry, and Martha has one. I'm thinking in terms of timing. So it is now June 14th.
Yes.
And the posting will close on Wednesday. And you will probably know within relatively few days whether or not that the posting, either of the postings has been fruitful.
Yes.
If one or both of them have not, you're going to need authorization to increase the salary level at which the positions are posted. And I understand that you want to get people on board ASAP.
Yes.
So would you want to inform us in a special meeting so that she could move forward?
That would be great. If it's necessary, I will certainly make you aware. And if we could have a special meeting for that authorization, that would be great. I hope we won't have to go that route, but I want to let everyone know where we stand with it.
Okay, thanks. Just keep me posted and we'll accommodate you as best we can. Martha?
Great idea to be interviewing as you go. I guess it seems like the public should know which people's salaries have been increased or which positions. And that certainly indicates which positions are doing more work. And I think that that's totally appropriate. But
Sure. Our Deputy County Administrator, Communications Director, Chief Equity Diversity Officer, and Admin Assistant.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yep. Okay. So then the last but not least thing I wanted to go over is, and I'm going to share my screen, but I see there's another question perhaps before I start.
Oh, yes, Leslie. Thanks, Lisa. I can take notes and look at the screen at the same time.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask briefly, with the position that's the two positions that are posted right now, is the salary posted with those positions?
Yes.
Okay. Can you remind folks on the call and the public what we're hiring for? How much?
The budget analyst position starts at $53,955 and it goes up to a working rate of $58,593. The budget director position starts, the hiring rate is $70,158, and after 9 months goes up to the working rate of $76,190.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So now I'm going to try to share my screen. Bear with me. Okay. Is everyone able to see what I'm seeing now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So just for your awareness, I have 13 slides to go through, and it's kind of a high-level overview of the American Rescue Plan, and I do intend to share this in my report to the full legislature tomorrow as well. A lot of the information in here has been provided by NACO and NISAC and the interim final rule. There is a frequently asked questions document on the interim final rule of the American Rescue Plan, which continues to be updated. So we're still getting this information as we go. So the first tranche, you can see Tompkins County's total allocation of about $19.8 million. The first tranche of Tompkins County's allocation, about $10 million, is now sitting in an interest-bearing account, as I said before, earning 0.15% interest. So on about 10 million, it's earning about 15,000 per year. The second tranche is expected to be deposited next year by the Treasury in May or June of 2022. Just a few key dates that we're looking at, and there are others as well, but March 3rd, 2021 is the beginning of the recovery funds covered period. So when we're looking at reimbursement for costs incurred around COVID, we can't look back any further than March 31st, 2021. It's really from that point and going forward. And it wouldn't apply to any projects prior to that date either. July 9th is the deadline to submit questions or comments on the interim final rule, with the final rule coming out sometime thereafter. So we in Tompkins have already submitted questions through NISAC to NACO. Jason, together with several legislators, compiled our comments and questions. But it's just a reminder that the final rule has not yet been published on how exactly to use these funds. We have a pretty good idea through the interim rule, but it's not been finalized. December 31st, 2024, the funds must be obligated or committed by that date. and December 31st, 2026, the funds must be spent and all work must be completed and accounted for. How the funds may be used, there are 4 broad categories with lots of details and nuances involved with each. So I'm not going to go into all of those nuances, but the first is to respond to the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts, assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, tourism, travel, hospitality industry. The second, to respond to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency. And this includes, both any worker in any industry. The third category is provision of government services to the extent that the reduction in revenue was due to the COVID-19 public health emergency. So there's a calculation of revenue loss involved there. And the fourth is to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. So I think one of the key takeaways here is that items 1, 2, and 4 involve an investment in the broader community, and item number 3 involves investment in government services to make up for lost revenues due to the pandemic. So a little more on the calculation of lost revenue, which applies to item number 3 from the previous slide. In order to use the ARP funds toward government services, you have to calculate the revenue shortfalls caused by the pandemic. And there's a formula provided for that calculation, which includes using a base year revenue for the most recent full fiscal year prior to the pandemic, applying a growth adjustment to that, which is the average annual revenue growth over the 3 full fiscal years prior to the pandemic, or you can use a growth factor of 4.1, whichever is higher, and subtracting the actual revenue collected during the year of the pandemic. And the remainder is the calculation of the revenue loss. So over the last week or so, Kevin and Amy in administration together with Rick have been working on this figure, and the initial estimate identified was 21.9 million in lost revenue. Again, this is high level. We are not ready to fully stand by that, but that's it's over the 20 million mark, which is terrible because it indicates how much revenue we've lost, but it's good in a way because it means we can choose to use choose to use the ARP funds to invest back in government services. We can capture all of our 19.8 million for Tompkins County in one fell swoop. And from the webinars and brainstorming discussions we've had with other counties and NISAC on this topic, this seems to be the strategy that most are looking to capture as many funds as possible with as few actions as possible using the lost revenue calculation. Again, there are going to be audits and after the fact to ensure that these funds were captured correctly and utilized correctly. So these details will be very important, and lessening the transactions will mean less likelihood for errors. So then once the revenue loss is calculated and the funds are successfully captured, the category of government services is given fairly broad latitude. And it includes, but it's not limited to, maintenance or PAYGO funded building of infrastructure, including roads, cybersecurity, hardware, software, protection of critical infrastructure, health services, environmental remediation, school or educational services, and provision of public safety. And then there are some prohibited uses of ARP funds for, related to revenue loss. Cannot be used on debt obligations, interest or principal on debt, money owed on settlement agreements, or replenishing our financial reserves or rainy day funds. So going back and just a little refresher and highlights on our impacts on the county's 2021 budget and where we stand now. We have 47 fewer positions on the county's roster than we did in 2020. It's a 6% reduction. And we're starting to see that in some departments are straining with that reduced workforce, which you've seen in the last couple of meetings. I'm starting to hear from departments about potential OTRs that will be coming forward in 2022 to restore some positions that were cut. We also know that there were 41 retirements in 2020 due to the early retirement incentive, which was a significant loss in institutional knowledge, and organizational training was cut in the budget for 2021, which will need replenishing and was not included in the maintenance of effort budget. We had reduced spending in the 2021, 6 to 12% reduction in departmental and supported agency budgets. We cut our capital program by 11%. We assumed a decrease in sales tax and casino revenues for 2021, and we increased the levy by 2.21%, and we increased our solid waste fee. This is for the current year. And also a similar refresher on our current capital plan for 2021. What's included in our current plan. We have a capital program of over 120 million. It was cut by 11% for 2021, the equivalent of about $770,000. We're still striving to achieve net zero operations by 2040. This was pushed back due to the pandemic. We were originally planned to reach net zero by 2035. And we had a $25 to $30 million public safety building was cut out of the budget and replaced instead with about $4 million in upgrades to the jail public safety to get us through the next 5 to 7 years. So, so there's some rationale for considering investments of the ARP funds in our capital program. ARP funding is one time and should be dedicated to one-time expenses, such as capital. Avoiding the short-term and long-term debt will open capacity in our general fund to support departments and agencies with target funding. It'll provide stability for county government over the long term with some tax rate stabilization. It provides us an opportunity to support other core services in advance of the full recovery of our revenues. And it could advance our county's energy goals of achieving net zero operations sooner, possibly as soon as 2030. So in these last 3 slides, I'm going to show some comparisons for using various levels of the ARP funding toward our capital program. And again, this is the same strategy that was put forth during the budget retreat in April, except now we've materialized some figures in more detail to share with you. And the last slide, so you're aware, is a comparison of all of the different options, so you can see them side by side. But this first option shows utilizing 16.8 of the 19.8 million in ARP funds toward the capital program. This would support 9 major capital projects. With this option, we would not have to increase our capital contribution in 2022 because we'd be using ARP funds for that purpose, meaning we could save or redistribute $250,000 in target spending toward our departments or other programs. And with this option, we could move our net zero energy goals to 2030 instead of 2040, where we are now. And we could avoid spending an estimated $2.4 million in interest payments. And that's assuming 2% interest over 10 years. As we know, interest rates are at an all-time low and will probably only go up from here. The second option shows utilizing about 8 million out of the 19.8 million in ARP funds toward the capital program. This would support 4 major projects. With this option, we would have to increase our capital contribution in 2022 by $250,000, which is 0.5% of the prior year's levy. With this option, we would achieve our net zero energy goals by 2035 instead of 2040, where we are now. And with this option, we would avoid about $913,000 in interest payments, so almost $1 million. And this is the last slide here showing the 3 options side by side. 9 projects at the 16.8 million, 4 projects at around 8 million, or funding no capital projects with the ARP funds. So not using the ARP funds at all toward capital, we will require higher annual capital contributions and paying more in interest payments. We'll likely have to push back other projects such as facility restoration, downtown facility, roads, or increase the annual contribution by 0.75% of the prior year's levy for the next few years. We would stay at the 2040 net zero energy goal. Using this, not using any ARP funds toward capital. We would be using about $10 million in the general fund balance to fund the downtown office project and $4 million in funds for the public safety improvements. We wouldn't want to bond for those improvements over a 10-year period because we'd be paying off the debt service on an old building, which we could be demolishing after building a new one. By using, some amount of the ARP funds to support capital will allow for other county departments and programs to be supported with target funding. Otherwise, we would be, these departments and programs would need to wait until revenues recover or rely on the one-time funding, year after year for the funding. So I want to end here, and this is providing budget capital personnel and the legislature with some various options for consideration for investment, with the recommendation that the funds be invested in capitals to support the restoration and stability of county operations. And if we don't use the ARP funding toward capital, we'll have to increase the levy to meet our current capital obligations or push back the timeline on some substantial projects. And this would help support core programs with target money while using the ARP for one-time purposes. So I think I can stop there, and happy to field questions. And I can leave this last slide up if it's helpful, or I can stop sharing, but it's up to you guys.
Lisa, if you wouldn't mind stopping sharing so that I can see everybody's hands. And
sure.
Okay, Mike.
That was very clear and very succinct. I thank you for that, Lisa. But those potentials that you had, like 9 projects, 6 projects, there's nothing wrong with other intermediary steps. For example, we could pick a 6 project capital investment, for example. I'm thinking about how much money we're going to have left over for all the requests that we have out there for things to help the community. And I'm just trying to make sure that we have some flexibility there.
Absolutely. I think that these just give you, gives a frame of reference for you to base some decisions on and to know the relative costs.
Thank you.
Martha?
Thank you, Deborah. Thanks very much, Lisa. I really appreciate having this overview of the law and what our choices are. The new news is that you've calculated the $20 million can all be considered lost revenue. Our question is, do we have, before we make decisions on the spending, do we have to get that approved by Treasury or anybody else, or can
No.
forgiveness later, or?
My understanding is that you have to act as prudently and carefully as possible, and with the understanding that you will be audited. So that's why we're asking a lot of questions, and yeah.
Okay, and that just determines, what that means is not that we don't have the money, but it just affects the flexibility and how much we can actually spend on county expenses, governmental expenses. Okay.
Yes.
I really like the idea of a mix of purposes here. So my initial reaction is the $8 million towards capital is certainly feels like a pretty good solution. I think it will be important as we get deeper into this to talk about the time spent. For example, and I was trying to take notes, you said we would save, if we would save $913,000 in interest over how many years? Is that considered a 20-year bond or a 10-year bond, or
10?
That's 10 years. So I think it's important as we think about this, that's part of the calculation.
Sure.
I also, we also have two sets of decisions, like there's the first year and the second year. So maybe maybe there's a different mix of what we do in year one versus year two. Year one maybe being important to kickstart the local, more important to kickstart the local economy. Maybe by year two, we'd feel like those needs are maybe less urgent. So just some general parameters, some general reaction.
And if I could say one thing, because it sparked another thought, Martha, is if so long as we have captured the funding and calculated the lost revenue correctly, and we apply it correctly toward the services or capital or whatever, if we apply it correctly, then any savings achieved by doing that, we could then spend in any way we wanted to. There's greater flexibility there. So we would not then be tied to any of the stipulations of ARP.
Okay, but then also, then that's a question, I started thinking about Jonathan Wood's usual prohibition, statement that we can't spend general purpose, we can't spend county money to help private businesses. Whereas with ARP, because of the federal nature of the source, we can. So that's another wrinkle, whereas we obviously support nonprofit services and contracts, et cetera, but there are things that we cannot do in the normal course of our spending that might be important for local businesses at this point. We could do that with the ARP. Okay, thank you very much.
Rich?
I just had a logistic question. If 9.9 million is not going to be transferred to us until next June, would it be an option to get a ban? And what, maybe Rick knows, what are the ban rates running right about now?
I don't know what the ban rates are right now. It's obviously less than 1%. Because of the last bans that we did, and the rates are even lower And the problem with a ban, it takes about 6 months for us to work on that. And we usually only do bans and bonds once a year, and that's in February. So we're just started now with this recent set of capital meetings we had with department heads that we're now putting together our next ban and bond issue. Actually just started last week, and we'll be working on that over the next 30 to 90 days, bringing you resolutions for various projects in August, September, and October. So we could slide it into the next issuance if that would work, but it takes much too long to orchestrate and put it together if you were thinking of doing one sooner.
All right, so as a practical matter, we can't necessarily get that 9.9 second payment until next June.
Until February. The bonds, ban, we could get it as early as.
So you're saying you could add it to the February ban, but then we'd only get a few months. Okay.
Right.
All right. Thanks.
Anybody else?
Just a quickie.
Mike and then Leslie.
Wouldn't it have to be a revenue anticipation note?
Yes. A RAN instead of a ban, but we would get our bond attorney to write all that up properly for us.
Yeah, you're right. RAN instead of ban.
Potato, potato. Leslie.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to say that I've been reaching out to my community about the ARP funding coming through, hearing from folks about their priorities. This is really helpful to see, what the different levels would be if we dedicated these funds toward government lost revenue or toward projects that we're hoping to do from a governmental level. And initially, folks recognize that government services from the county as well as government revenue loss is important to backfill and to make sure that we're moving forward as a whole government and that we can provide the services that we need to. But there are some other interests out there as far as backstopping, some of the economic fall off for some of our local businesses, as well as more community services. So I just want to say, I think that there's more of an even spread from an interest level. And there's also an interest in infrastructure. So don't let that get away either. There definitely is some feedback. This is early feedback. I know we're going to do broader outreach, but I do think that we will hear from folks that they recognize this need from the government level, but that there are other needs too. And the other thing I'd like to say is that as we develop our plan to move forward, keeping in mind CFA funding that's happening and how we coordinate, collaborate with the other municipalities for spending in order to address needs across the municipalities, I think we need to be pretty strategic.
Thanks, Leslie. Martha?
Yeah, I know we're going to have much longer conversations about all this with more information. And Deborah, thank you for working with Dominic on a survey. I guess, Lisa, I would just ask, when you present the slides to the Ledge tomorrow night, if you could add in that time value, such and such savings over how many years, that'd be very helpful. So we get a sense to try to add, how much does that save a year? For example, 250,000 a year is not quite 0.5% on the tax levy, as I understand it. I think our last budget was about $490,000 a year was 1 point on the tax levy. So, and also, we have, in terms of increasing our capital expense, we have been able quite successfully to absorb 0.5 or 3/4% on the levy every year for capital. We had built that in by policy, and this year with COVID we cut it, but going back to more normal is, we probably would be able to absorb that as well. Thanks for including that information, and this is really a very helpful presentation. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Henry, and then I'm going to make a suggestion, and then we're moving on.
Okay, thank you, Lisa, for that report. I've heard that you attended a NISAC meeting for this. Did they talk about the making up for the lost positions that we've lost over time? They also talk about return on investment in terms of spending the money in other ways.
I'm sorry, were you asking me, did they speak to that or?
Yeah, they speak to that.
Well, I attended a NISAC training, and then Amy and I attended a meeting of county administrators with NISAC in attendance where the topic was ARP funds. And it was a bit of a brainstorming session. People were talking about their local considerations about how to use the funds. And Amy, I don't know if you want to comment, but I think, what we were hearing from a number of localities was investments in capital for one-time expenditures and calculation of revenue loss. I think that, as a whole, people are looking for, again, capturing as much of the funding as broadly as possible with as few transactions as possible, and applying it to one-time costs such as capital and one-time investment in county infrastructure. But Amy, you were also on there. You've heard a little more than I did as well.
Yeah, I think you captured it well, Lisa. I mean, the communities are doing different types of things. Some have surveyed their county departments only. Some have looked at community as well. Majority, though, are talking about capital expenses, as Lisa said, and focus really on capturing kind of that broad swath in the drawdowns versus doing a lot of individual movement. Not only for ease, but because with the capital investment, as Lisa had outlined, it offsets additional potential funding on, the levy side of things. So there's a lot of discussion in that realm. I hope that answers your question, Henry.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lisa and Amy. I would find it useful. You've outlined, Lisa, how much we would save in interest. But I would find it useful to know if you aggregate the interest and principal to get the total debt service, because that's really what we're out of pocket when we borrow money. And also, if it obviates the need for putting back that percentage reserve in one or more years. I mean, I'd like to be able to see the total amount of money that we're saving in these various scenarios of capital investment, because I think that would make it easier for us to figure out just how this is helping the county stay sustainable years into the future. I know it's a big ask, I'm sorry. But anyhow, all right, so we've got about 20 minutes and we still haven't heard from the wonderful Ruby. So let's move on, please. Ruby, what you got for us?
Okay. Let me get my thing here. I just wanted to talk to you. We've been talking about options for the county administrator recruitment plan. And I wanted to provide you with a couple of options and letting you know that either way, we must show an investment. It's going to cost more than it did in 2017, whether we do it in-house or whether we do it a recruitment firm or hybrid. So I'm just going to jump right into it. In 2017, the Department of Human Resources coordinated the search. We yielded 20 candidates. They were primarily from Tompkins and surrounding areas, even though it had some national sources. So it was a national search, even though we only received applications from primarily Tompkins and surrounding counties. The time frame for the 2017 search was a 5-month period, including August through December, with the initial discussions beginning late July. The components of the search process are the same. It included the application period with an essay, scenario-based questions. They had a first round interviews, second round finalist presentations and interviews, meet and greet sessions with the department heads before the final selection was made. And approximately $7,100 was spent on advertising The start date was January 29, 2018. We looked at that source of advertising, and those same sources today would round us about $9,556, which is an increase from 2017. So it's almost $10,000 in advertising if we use the same sources that were used in 2017. So here are our options. Options number one is that we retain a recruitment search firm for a full search, which would include the initial planning, discussion of the desired characteristics, development and revision of the job description, development of the recruitment plan and promotional material, posting of the positions, the flyers, screening of applicants, presentation of pre-screen applicants to the legislature, and the reference and background checks. Now that's a full search. The search committee would be made up of legislators and whoever we decide to put on the committee. We would do the interviews, select the finalists, and the search firm would pick up back with the references and background checks. There's some pros and there's some cons. The pros, they have an assessment and leadership tools available to develop candidate profiles. They have a national reach and an already existing networks of high quality vetted candidates, specifically for government jobs and nonprofit jobs. They have expertise in candidate selection. They have targeted markets. Again, like I said, for government, human services, and nonprofit organizations. They have the latest methods of sourcing the talents, whether social media, electronic networks, or publications. They have the latest software and the equipment and the skills to produce the promotional material. And they have the dedicated staff who will be responsible for coordinating all the scheduling and the follow-up. There's a fixed cost and fixed timelines. And then again, the last one is their professional reputations. You would hope to attract a wider variety of diverse candidates. The cons, the cost. And then there's the lack of local or organizational cultural studies that they're not familiar with. And again, there does seem to be a quick turnaround with a lot of their candidates. Option number two was HR would provide the full service recruitment and administrative support. We'd collaborate with the legislators to review and revise job descriptions and do all the steps that I named in the first option. The pros for that, we have internal control over it, and there's an intimate knowledge of the position and the organizational structure. Cons, there's an additional workload. It is a heavy lift, even for a fully staffed HR department, which we are not yet. We are still trying to get our staff on board. Also, a con from my perspective is we primarily have local recruiting and networking. We have the lack of software and equipment and staff capacity to design the promotional material, and there's variable cost. So I can't tell you it's going to cost $16,000 and we're stuck with that. So those are some pros and cons for the option that HR does the full service recruitment. And option three is a hybrid of, and we've done this for multiple searches here, where we use the recruitment firm to help us develop the recruitment materials and place the notices, and then HR takes it from there. We would do the screening of applicants based upon our applicant system. We'd perform reference and background checks. We'd coordinate interview schedules. And the pros and cons are basically you just choose one or the others from what we've done before. So those are the three options that I see. I did an estimated timeline, which would be from July till about December, using the same amount of time, where we'd be involved in certain processes at certain periods of time. If we chose to recruit the firm, we should do so by mid-July in order to start the process. And if we decided to do it in-house, we'd start doing with developing a recruitment material. My recommendation, if I'm asked, before I get to that, we did solicit 4 proposals from recruitment firms just to give us an idea of what services are available and the cost. And we can do that as long as there's the spending amount is $20,000 to $50,000. We don't have to go through a formal RFP process. We had 4 firms that submitted scopes of proposal, and one was from Albany that we've used before. One's from Cincinnati, one from New York, and one from Keller, Texas. The 2 of the most affordable ones was the one from Albany and Novak from Cincinnati, Ohio. And it would range anywhere from $20,000 to $25,000 total if we did full service. But each of those companies also have where we can pick and choose services that we like. We don't have to go with the full packet. Again, if I were to recommend, I'm just gonna, we have an HR office. We do have a recruitment administrator. Our 2 major drawbacks in my eyes are we don't have the national reach, and we don't have the ability to produce eye-catching recruitment material. So a hybrid where we've done either do that, outsource those 2 functions with HR doing the rest may be the best option for us. But again, I do think we need some assistance in a couple of areas of the search.
Thank you, Ruby.
Mm-hmm.
Responses, thoughts? Martha.
Thanks for Ruby. That's great. I didn't know you'd had a chance to reach out to firms currently. I that's really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly like the idea of using a firm we've used before as one option, but it's good to have 2 that seem maybe similar in price. Maybe it's the Goldilocks thing. I don't know. I like the idea of the hybrid. I think what you've articulated, I think this is your recommendation. Use a firm that really has the ability to do some very special graphics or whatever the
Right.
what materials look like, and to get that out there across the country. But then we do the rest in house.
Right.
I do think it would be not the best use of time to hand this all off to another firm that we'd have to tell them who we are, and then they'd have to read our minds really, really, really well. I really like the idea of doing the subsequent work in-house. So thank you.
Yeah, I did a little bit more research too, just in our recent searches, just to give you an idea of why it's important that we have help with the sources of advertising. For the budget director, and Lisa mentioned it before, we have very small candidate pools. We've had very small candidate pools for quite a few of the jobs since I've been here. For the chief sustainability officer, which is a small community, granted, but there were a total of 14 applicants. For budget director, we've had 6. And those are the ones that we've used sources from in-house. We had assistance from one search company for Commissioner of Human Resources, which netted 71 applicants that were approved, and for Chief Equity and Diversity Officer, which netted 38 approved. So there's a little bit of difference in the pools that we can come from because they have a wider reach, and they probably have better deals for advertising than if we're just doing a one-on-one. I checked the sources that was used in the 2017 search for county administrator. Although they spent over $7,000, 20 applicants, and none of them, 4 of them came from the International City and County Management Association. 1 came from a Beyond Smart Match, and another from a town and city managersjob.com. The rest of them were personal networking. So a lot of our sites aren't yielding the results. And I don't know, it's not specific to Tompkins County. It's nationwide. So unless you have, like Henry mentioned, a list where people say, I'm interested in these type of jobs and you can contact them directly, which we don't have. We're trying to get that as a source of part of our applicant system going forward. But right now we don't have that. So we'll really be spending money on sites that we're not really sure will yield results that we need for this type of position.
Henry.
Ruby, do you know the estimated cost of the hybrid system?
Well, that would depend on the advertising. The one company that we looked at, there was a flat fee of $2,500 for advertising, but that was connected to one of the others. So we would really have to highlight what we needed from them and then get the figures from them.
And does the Albany company focus mostly in New York, or are they national, international?
They are national, and we've used them before.
Thank you.
Mike?
Ruby, I was wondering what positions have we used recruiters for?
We've used a recruiter for the Chief Equity and Diversity since I've been here. Well, that was right before my time, but with the searches that I pulled, Chief Equity and Diversity Officer, we've used them for the Commissioner of Human Resources. We've used them for the mental health positions, which are difficult to fill. Those are the ones that I have right now for that one company. And there were about 6 altogether.
And the way you used them was for the advertising?
Advertising.
Okay, well, that's, there are lots of ways to hire advertising, and so that's
right.
Not,
and I think with the Chief
that's not
Equity, they
online.
did screen them as well. They screened applicants for us.
Okay. We don't have very much time left. I would favor the hybrid method for a couple of reasons. First off, because Ruby's our professional HR person and she recommends it. And secondly, because I do think, as I think Martha mentioned in one of the emails that's circulated about this is the most consequential selection we're going to be making for many years to come. And I want to cast as broad a net as possible. In our discussions, Ruby's admitted that, yeah, we can advertise, but we don't really know how useful the advertising outlets we choose are, whereas a professional recruiting firm would know that. And as Ruby mentioned, they probably get cheaper advertising rates than we would. So if it's all right with everybody, does everybody feel like we could say that the consensus of this committee is to go with the hybrid choice? Because I want to present this possibility to the legislature tomorrow night. How do you all feel about that? Martha?
Yeah, I think that's wise. I do also want to make sure that we're not seduced by some magical people out there somewhere nationally. I think we've often found that our best fits come from closer to home. I really want to make sure candidates in the county community, say a nonprofit or whatever other organizations, business, whatever, as well as our internal candidates. I can think of a good number of folks who would be strong internal candidates, that we don't get seduced by the idea that farther away is better. However, I really support Ruby's suggestion that we go this way. I appreciate it. And sure, I'm supporting that to the legislature.
Thanks. I do think we're much too old and crusty to get seduced. Glenn, and then Mike, and then Henry, and then we've got one more resolution, and it's 5-5.
Okay. Ruby, will this firm also advise us on the salaries that we are offering?
No, that was compensation was not a part of what we asked for as far as their scope of services. We can do a comparison of salaries ourselves just by looking at the state county associations. They usually provide that information for us.
What is the salary compared to?
It's compared to other city managers.
No, I know that the salary we're offering, is that competitive or is it not competitive?
Not really. It's a little bit lower than most of them. Most of them that we looked at started like 155, 160 and up. I think we're at like 135,
Yeah,
something
so
like that.
Deborah, isn't our first conversation is how much we're going to offer?
Yes. Yeah, and this brings up another larger issue, which is at some point we're going to have to deal with the compensation study, but because we're having this problem across the board with
Right, salaries.
salaries, yeah. How do you feel about the hybrid, Glenn?
I agree with Ruby.
Okay, great. Okay, so I've got Mike and then Henry.
As I said, I can live with hiring out advertising if that's what we need. But I really think we need to keep close the interview process and the process that we've used in the past. We've had people from all over the country. Frank Krupa came to us from Florida. Rick Snyder came to us from originally Florida, and then I forgot what Midwestern state he was in. He came to us.
They're all the same. No, just kidding.
Missouri.
I really don't
Missouri.
think that our searches have limited us to just surrounding counties. I don't think that's been the case.
We've had some regional marketing, at least what I'm looking, now we advertise everywhere that we can. But like I said, there's no real guarantee. And this year, COVID, like I said, it's not just Tompkins County. We had lower and smaller applicant pools in Niagara Falls. And that's for all positions, not just executive level ones. We had the Dickens of the time, even filling positions like police officers. We usually had 300 to 400 applicants. The last year I was there, we barely had 100 and 125. So we just have it's the posting of positions. We don't have the publications anymore, the written publications. Nobody really gets newspapers anymore. I'm not sure about magazines. It's all really websites, electronic data, and word of mouth. So we've got to figure out how to get the widest reach so that, yes, we may have an internal candidate who gets the job, but you want to have a choice. You want to be at a point where you have enough candidates to say, we've got the right one, rather than like for budget where we may have to go out and search again. You just want to be able to get the widest pool possible.
Okay, Rich, how do you feel about the hybrid thing?
Yeah, I would like to give Ruby her ability to just go do it. It sounds reasonable.
Okay, great. So we're going to let Henry close this out, and then we're going to take up that last resolution.
Yeah, and as I said another time, that the city of Ithaca posted their chief of staff position, and they're having to repost it because they did not get the jobs as many people applying for the jobs as they hoped. So
yeah, a cautionary tale for sure.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Ruby.
You're welcome. Just let me know what you need from me.
Okay, so really quickly, we have a resolution, appropriation from contingent fund, transfer funds for tourism promotion, ID number 10189. This was kind of a joint project that Martha started, and then I worked on it with her and with Katie and Nick in DPS. And we arrived at this proposal as an allocation of funds that would, in the opinion of our planning department and Nick as our STPB person, help goose our tourism industry along for the summer and fall. Can I get a motion on this, please? Martha moves. I will second it. Questions, conversation, Martha.
Yeah, thanks very much, Deborah. Thanks for your help on this, and especially Nick and Katie, plus Peggy Coleman, Jennifer Tavares. This is sort of putting back not all, but a little bit of the tourism money that was cut this current year. You know, of course, they saw drastic drop last year. They also were cut this year, but this is Jason's budget proposal that we basically accepted at the retreat had them moving towards whether it was one-time funding from fund balance or from ARP, putting back their funding. This doesn't by a long stretch put it all back, but Nick kind of really picked out some specific things he thought would help to stimulate growth of this economy, of the tourism economy. And there's an urgency because this season, like right now, is their high season. And if we waited until September, it would kind of not really have the same impact at all. So this is one part of the tourism budget, whether it gets recaptured by ARP monies or the fund balance, whichever. Right now, this just takes out of the contingent fund. And I think we can afford it, but also more importantly, we can't afford not to do it because this is the sector of the economy that was so very, very hard hit. And this is one way we can help them get back.
And we feel it when
Can I interrupt? Where is the resolution? Who sent it?
Michelle sent it, a couple of different forms of it. I think she sent one version of it on Friday, but then she sent it again today.
Thank you.
Can someone put it on screen?
I have it here. I have it here if you'd like me to do that, Deborah.
I'm not the host.
Kathy, am I allowed to do that?
Yes, Martha, you can share your screen.
Let's see.
Thanks, Kathy.
All right, there's this, there it is. You can make it smaller on your own screen if you want to see the whole thing. Those are the items, and there's the total dollar amount. Does that help?
Yes, thank you, Martha.
Okay.
Does anyone have any specific questions about this?
And I know there are a couple people on the call who might have something to add or answer questions.
Yeah, Katie and Nick are with us if we need them.
Deborah,
Yes?
I just want to say I'm the liaison to the STPP board, and I readily approve this because they've been hurting, and that
Yeah, I know.
this is emergency funding.
Yes.
So I just wanted to say that. That's
Yeah,
it.
and the real impetus for this, I think, was that last month's HED meeting, where we heard, a heartfelt plea from people in the tourism sector, and particularly Peggy, who really wants to get the advertising out there and is afraid to because she's afraid the rug's going to get pulled out from under her again. We want her to be able to advertise and get the word out that Ithaca and Tompkins County are a great place to vacation.
And just to finish that thought, this would come to HED at our next meeting later in June, and then get to the Ledge meeting on July 6th, if it comes out of here.
Okay, Rich.
Yeah, I can't find it. So I would be inclined to vote for it here, but I might vote against it on the floor when I have more time to really look at it. But it seems to make sense. So I would support it at this time, but I don't want to mislead people.
Okay. All right. Are we ready to vote? Martha?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Provisional yes. Glenn?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm a yes. All right. So that passes. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. We covered an enormous amount of territory today. And I think that that's going to be the way our year looks. I see you, Kathy.
Okay.
I think that's the way our year's going to be this year. That's just the way it is. Congratulations. You're on BCP. Kathy, did you have something you wanted to say?
I just wanted to remind you about the TC3 resolution that still needs to be considered.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you.
Rick's hand's up too.
And Rick,
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, especially for Kathy, to get it on the agenda, is that next month on July 12th at this meeting, the Budget Committee meeting, will be the auditor's presentation of the 2021 financial report. So Kathy, if you can help plan that as the major presentation topic, and we'll be passing a resolution for those financial statements at that meeting also. Of course, it goes to the ledge the very next week thereafter. That's all I've got.
woohoo, audit report.
Mhm.
All right, so we have resolution ID 10174, authorization for public hearing, Tompkins Cortland Community College operating budget 2021-22. And I note that this will be, there would be a change on line 7. It will be held on July 20th. Is that right, Kathy?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's the motion we're voting on. Does anybody have any questions? Mike?
I'm just moving it.
Oh, okay, Mike moves it. Can I get a second? Glenn seconds it. All in favor, Rich?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Martha?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay. Super. Does anybody have anything else, or are we all comatose?
No, we have appointments, Deborah. Do we have to vote on these, Kathy?
Yes.
Oh, goodness.
I will move them. Ruby Pulliam to the Health Insurance Consortium Board and Sheila Michelle Nunn to the TC3 Board.
All right. Can I get a second from a committee member? Glenn? All in favor? Rich?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes, but can I say something afterwards?
Yes. Martha?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, Mike, what would you like to say?
I just want to say that I think Michelle Nunn has been a wonderful addition to the Tompkins Cortland Community College Board. She is one of the 3 county appointees. She went through a screening process, which we advertised for people interested to fill the vacancy on the board at that time. And she was head and shoulders above the other candidates with her experience. And she's gone on that board. And from my perspective, she's done a great job up there. So I really think that she deserves reappointment. And it's a pretty important appointment if you think about it. I think it's the longest term appointments that we make. It is for 7 years.
Wow. Okay, thanks, Mike. That's good to know. Anybody else? Okay, I think we're adjourned. And thank you all very, very much. Kathy, have I forgotten anything else? Today's just not my day. 5 hours of sleep, not optimal.
You didn't have an executive session then?
No, we thought we might need to, but Lisa and I talked about it and we're hoping that it won't be necessary, so.
Okay.
All right, thanks very much, everyone, for your patience.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Deborah.
Good night.